Today I'm meeting with Kevin Wyatt, and rather than me introduce him, I'll let him tell you exactly who he is and what he does and why we're talking today.
My name is Kevin Wyatt. I'm a private investigator here in Utah. I own Eyes on Private Investigations.
And as we do oftentimes, we met with you beforehand over lunch and just got to talking, and I'm really excited to have Kevin here with us because a lot of people don't fully understand not only what a private eye does, but what a private eye can do for people in family law settings. Child custody, divorce, alimony, all sorts of things like that. And we want you to understand that it's not as expensive as you might think. Trying to do it yourself is not only ineffective, but actually could do more harm than good to you and your family and things like that. So what I've asked Kevin to do is just give you a little idea of his background, because I'm grateful he's here, but then also, more than anything else, just to tell you about, he's going to give you a couple of illustrative examples of real cases that he's handling or handled where he was able to do things that really made a difference, whether it ended up with a change in court or not. So I'll let you pick and choose in what order you want to talk about them. But before we do that, tell them a little bit about your experience and what you bring to the private investigative work you do.
Okay. I've been in law enforcement for about 25 years. I've owned an agency since 2009, and during that time we've investigated hundreds of cases, whether it be child custody, insurance defense, malingering cases where insurance, but we do a lot of child custody, divorce, child abuse type investigations.
Right. And one that always is fun when it comes to talking to the private investigators, alimony termination. They're always entertaining. So in that regard, where do you want to start with a case of, we want to focus on some child custody, child abuse. Tell us about an alimony case or two if you'd like, and perhaps what else am I thinking? Just those things that will come up. Oh, a parent time issue where somebody doesn't get his or her right of first refusal. But you go in the order you want.
Okay. An alimony case. We had a case where a husband and wife had been divorced for a couple years. The husband came to me, the ex-husband came to me and said, look, I believe that my ex-wife is cohabitating with a male. My children are there. I don't mind paying my child support, but I'm paying $3,000 or $4,000 a month in alimony. I'm trying to terminate that if in fact she is living with this individual. For not a lot of money, we were able to send an investigator out. We did surveillance. We actually did, in this particular case, an undercover operation. We found that the boyfriend was selling some products online. We actually posed as a potential buyer, went in and got him on videotape saying that he had been living with her for several months, that they bought the home together. He, in fact, was wearing a wedding ring and even stated that they were married, even though they weren't.
Yeah, referred to her as his wife.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so, in that regard, that in and of itself was enough to bring an action in court to terminate alimony.
Oh, I'll tell you, that's more than enough to bring an action in court. I mean, sometimes you're not so lucky, but yeah.
And so that case worked out really well. There are other cases where we'll go and investigate and see if there is a cohabitation issue, when in fact there isn't, or there at least isn't enough to show that it's a full-blown cohabitation, and therefore the attorney can then evaluate whether he or she wants to bring an action, whether it's enough that they believe that they can win in court.
Yeah, that brings peace of mind. It may disappoint, but at least you're thinking, well, I've thought this was happening, but now I don't have to feel so bad about that check I write every month.
Right. We had another case where a husband and wife got divorced. They had a small child. Part of their divorce agreement was that neither party would have a person of the opposite sex around the child until he was a certain age. The male hired me and believed...
by the way, and this was overnights. This was
Yes. Yes. And so the male hired me and believed that his ex-wife was in fact having a boyfriend stay in the home overnights, and or that she and the child were staying with him. We were able to place a GPS on her vehicle, and then we followed her to his home where in fact she was staying with the child multiple nights. Not every night, but she would go on the weekends and spend 2 or 3 nights, which was in fact in violation of the order.
All right.
So that was another successful case. We have other cases where we don't prove it, but at least it gives some peace of mind that we at least tried.
What's also interesting, and we are going to talk toward the end about, well, okay, well, now that he's told me how he does things, I'll just find somebody to do it for me, or I'll have my brother or my friend, or I'll do it myself. And we'll talk about why it is possible to do that, but not terribly wise. Let's talk about one instance where you were able to do something that, even if the person had been inclined to do this, it would be very difficult, if not impossible, hard to be detected, and on top of that, just really miserable. And that was that situation where you just said, you know, we were just about ready to give up. That's a good story, if you could share that one.
Yeah, we've had cases where we believed that there was either a cohabitation issue or some other issue. A case in point, we had a case where, again, the ex-husband hired us to look into his ex-wife and her having a male party stay nights. We spent several days investigating it. We had a GPS on her vehicle, and every night her vehicle was home. So, and he suspected that she was actually staying with the boyfriend.
But you found out that wasn't true.
Correct.
Yeah.
We didn't know who the boyfriend was, and so we couldn't physically go to his house. We had to physically follow her to his house.
And she never went anywhere.
And she didn't go. But we felt like there was something probably going on. I mean, usually if you have a hunch that something's going on, it's probably going on.
That's good to know.
You just need the proof. So we put a little bit of extra time into it. We had stayed evenings, still no boyfriend coming in, she not leaving. We decided to come in an early morning. And in fact, we ended up doing it several mornings because we confirmed it. But we were there prior to daylight.
Yeah, how early?
Yeah, it was about 5 in the morning when we arrived. Still dark outside, and we actually were able to see the boyfriend leave the home. From that, we watched him get in a vehicle, so now we have a vehicle. Now we can find out his identity. Now we can find out where he lives and see if her car's going there. So we were able to prove it, and we were almost going to give up because we didn't think there was anything there.
Now, see, what's interesting from the lawyer's perspective is that normally we're thinking, all right, these people aren't terribly careful. So if he was going to be driving to the girlfriend's house, he'd get up at 7:30, 8, be on his way and get to work, you know. But what they were doing is they suspected they might be followed. So what this guy was doing is showing up really late after you expect the private investigator to go home, and leaving really early.
Correct.
Before the private investigator gets there. So that's a testament to tenacity.
You know, and the other thing is he didn't go. It wasn't like he stayed the night, staying up late watching a movie.
Yeah, he
actually showered there and went straight to work.
Yeah.
He went straight to work, so it wasn't like it was an accident or an isolated incident.
Mm-hmm.
Every night he was coming in late, leaving way early, and going straight to work. So we were able to prove it, and it didn't take that much to do it.
Tell me about that instance where you've got situations where you may, as the non-custodial parent, or even if you're a joint custodial parent, have a situation where when the other parent's at work or can't take care of the kids, if you're available, you get the right of first refusal to take care before you can send the kids to daycare or grandma's. Tell them a little bit about how you were able to crack that one.
Well, we had a case not too long ago, actually, where the ex-husband, again, hired us. His concern was that the ex-wife was going out late at night. She was partying. In fact, these allegations were that she was probably a call girl or an escort. But his side of it was, she's not allowing me my first right of refusal. And it didn't take much. We put a GPS on her car and noted that she was leaving several nights a week, 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, and not calling the ex-husband to take the daughter. Very easy to prove. It just takes a little bit of effort, a little bit of time, and you need someone who knows how to do it.
In fact, let's segue into that. So why couldn't Dad just have, driven by at 9, 10 o'clock at night?
We've had clients, whether it be the ex-husband or the ex-wife, say, well, I had my friend follow her or him, and she saw this. A couple things can be very problematic with that. One is it's a lot of effort on your part.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to find friends that are willing to do enough work to get the dirt that you're trying to find.
Then the other party is going to argue in court that, well, that was your friend, therefore they lied or they embellished the truth. That becomes a problem. The other problem that I've seen clients be charged or be served with protective orders and or stalking injunctions because they're following their ex around or they're having a friend follow their ex around. As a private investigator, a licensed private investigator in Utah, there's actually an exemption in the law for that, which allows us to do that legally.
Yeah, because you are doing a job. You are not hired to be a stalker. Now, these other people clearly weren't stalking, but if you can make up a story that a judge will believe, you're going to get a stalking injunction.
You're going to get that order, and whether it's valid or not, getting a stalking injunction or protective order against you restricts you in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
You can't hunt anymore. You can't own a firearm. There's a lot of things that you can't do.
Here's another question I had too, is because if you send a friend, it's probably somebody your ex knows, and so it's much easier to get made. If it's like, well, wait a minute, why would you be at the same restaurant or club as I am, or how come you would be driving by here over and over again?
Case in point, I had a client who hired me. He said, well, my friend saw my ex-wife at a restaurant, and
that really was coincidence.
And it was a coincidence. Yeah. But in this particular case, they had a child that needed 24-hour care. So he calls his friend and says, hey, is your son with you? And he says, well, no, he's with my ex-wife. And he says, well, no, he's not, because she's at a restaurant with this man. And he says, holy crap, can you snap a photo for me? She was able to get a stalking injunction based on that one photo. And it was a coincidence.
Yeah. And it was a good piece of evidence.
Great evidence.
Yeah. But nevertheless, was she really afraid that she was being stalked?
I doubt it.
I doubt it, yeah.
I doubt it. But, so then, based on that, now he understands the problems associated with hiring or having your friend do it. So he hires a private investigator, and we were actually able to prove that she was meeting this boyfriend and she was leaving the child with people. She was leaving the child home alone.
Wow.
Which in fact was against the orders, and he was paying several $1,000s a month in alimony, and part of that reasoning was she can't have a job because she's got to stay home with the child, when in fact we proved that wasn't the case.
That's interesting. Now, one thing you've told me that I think a lot of people didn't know, I certainly didn't know it until I started talking about private investigation with people. You not only can do these investigations, do this work without fear of criminal prosecution, but private investigators can get access to information that no matter how badly I want it, I either can't get it or it would be a lot more time consuming and expensive. Could you just tell us about that a bit?
I pay hundreds of dollars a month for access to databases. I had a client call me and say, I know for a fact that my soon-to-be ex-wife's boyfriend has a particular conviction. I saw it on a website. I did the searches, didn't exist. His attorney did the searches, didn't exist.
Now, did you just Google him, or what are you talking about?
No, we have access to databases that the layperson or the public don't generally have access to.
And these are government databases. So these, if in other words, if somebody's convicted, it goes into this database the government keeps on people, and you can see the same information.
In Utah, we can't get access to the actual conviction record, but we have access to court records, and we have access to other things that verify that charge actually exists or that conviction actually exists. In this particular case, we're able to show that the charge that you saw was not an actual charge, but we were able to find other things. And you might pay, as an individual, you might pay $60, $80, $100 for a background check, and it actually be junk. By the time I get it and run it for $60 or $80, I can actually find the actual information.
So that dovetails perfectly with the next question. Okay, not everybody has a lot of money, but are private investigators only for the wealthy?
No, I've had clients who say, I've got X amount of dollars, whether it's $500 or $1,500, and say, I believe this is occurring. What we'll try to do is do that work within that budget. I have other clients who say, I don't care what it costs to prove it, just prove it. realizing that a private investigator in Utah is probably somewhere between $80 and $150 an hour. I'm on the lower end. There are other things that you'll pay for. I mean, report writing is an hourly. I mean, there are expenses.
And this should be obvious, but it's good to hear it from your mouth. If I pay $150, am I guaranteed to get a higher level of quality than $100 or $75 an hour?
Really, no. I mean, that comes down to anything. I mean, you need to look at experience. I mean, I have 25 years experience.
Yeah, you can go and get your car taken care of at the Ford dealership, or you can go to your neighborhood mechanic, and you might get the same service or even better service for less money. Exactly. Same goes with private investigators. So shop around, and you might be surprised. You can see people that get the same service as you charge, and they paid less money. Sorry, they paid more money.
Correct.
And could have gotten the same thing. Well, thank you very much. And I wanted to make sure that people understand is that a private investigator. Oh, lastly, before I do that, what is it about? You hinted at it a little earlier. It's like, well, if a friend or your mom helps you dig up this information, they get to court, and what's the court going to think?
They're going to think that it's falsified or trumped up information or embellished information. I mean, very often a client will say, well, my friend saw A, B, and C. And I'm like, well, okay, but we need to go re-verify that information because we are an independent party hired to find facts.
Or my friend saw it but didn't think to snap a photograph, or if he had, he ended up in jail. You saw it, you knew what to look for, you knew how to document it, you know what's going to be needed in court, and when you're examined as that witness, you'll be able to say, well, here's what I saw, but don't take my word for it. Here's my video, here's my photographs.
Exactly. We had a client, just a real quick case in point, we had a client who said, my ex-girlfriend, who they had a child together, she's involved in drugs, she's this, she's that. One of the things that we did is it's very difficult sometimes to find someone actually actively using drugs, right?
Yeah.
So what we did was actually we found mutual friends of the individuals, of both of them. We interviewed them and we got notarized affidavits of fact, which in turn is then used in court to bolster his story that this is in fact occurring. And so having been in law enforcement for so many years, having been a private investigator for so many years, we understand not only what you need video or factual wise, but we understand some of the nuances of, hey, if I have an affidavit, that would work. I mean, that will help bolster my case. And so we look at, my firm, we actually think outside the box. How are we going to get to the end result in the most cost-effective manner?
Excellent. This is Kevin Wyatt, and so for those of you that would like to speak to him more and see what he might be able to do for you, would you give them, once again, your contact information and the name of your agency?
Absolutely. It's Kevin Wyatt at Eyes On Private Investigations. We're at www.eyesonpi.com. Our phone number is 801-809-8533.
And spell eyeson.com so they know how to spell that.
It's eyes, like your eyes, EYESONPI.com.
Thanks so much.
Oh, thank you.